Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Conversations on the Gospel of Luke. We're getting close to the end of the Gospel here, but I want to make a suggestion to you. I want you to go back and take a look at a first couple of conversations we had, primarily about Luke chapters 1, 2, and 3. Part of the reason I'm asking you to do that is because this time of year is the time that Christmas occurs, obviously, and we celebrate basically what is the birth of Christ. And those first couple of chapters give us a lot of information about the birth of Christ. And not only Jesus' birth, but John the Baptist's birth. There are some miraculous things that occur, and it kind of got the whole community all astir and all kind of a flutter about what was going on and these children that were born and the unique things that happened around their births. So it would not be a bad idea at all to go back and take a look at a couple of those first couple of conversations and read through Luke chapters 1, 2, and 3 and realize that those things occurred in some miraculous ways. You might even recognize in there, if you read in Luke chapter 2, you'll see that part of that was a section of scripture that was read in a Charlie Brown Christmas. You remember that story that Charlie Brown is trying to figure out what the meaning of Christmas is, and one of his friends, Linus, stands up on stage with a spotlight on him, and he quotes from Luke chapter 2 about the shepherds in the field, about the angels and how they appeared to them. And Linus says to Charlie Brown, and that, Charlie Brown, is the meaning of Christmas. So I would encourage you to go back and read some of that and maybe think about reading some of that at your Christmas dinner for your family and friends and have some discussion about it. What we're looking at here in Luke chapters 19 and 20 is essentially the climax of that birth, of just who Jesus was and why he was born. What was so significant about the birth now is becoming more and more clear as Jesus enters Jerusalem for the last time. This is a section of scripture that is often called the triumphal entry. Sometimes it's celebrated on Palm Sunday, although Luke does not mention the palms that the crowd uses. But the fact is, Luke does mention a number of prophecies are being fulfilled as Jesus enters into Jerusalem. And his critics, Jesus' critics, tell Jesus after they listen to the crowd shouting in triumph and praising God and so forth, and they tell Jesus to silence his disciples. And Jesus says, you know what? If they didn't speak out, the very stones themselves would cry out. Creation, in a sense, a very real sense, is yearning for what Jesus is about to do. And it's kind of an earth-shaking event to the point of stones even crying, and calling and talking. Figure that one out. But it's a very interesting discussion that Jesus has with them. Actually, not much of a discussion, really. He just rebukes his critics. And Jesus goes, as he's approaching the city, he begins to weep over Jerusalem. He's very saddened. It's kind of a bittersweet occasion for him. It's joyous. It's a joyous triumph as he enters, but he's sad that so many of the leaders and the people of Israel really don't recognize what was happening at that very moment. God was instituting the kingdom that they claimed to wish for, but they kind of missed it. Just as they had missed the full divine purpose of what the temple was all about. So Jesus goes in to Jerusalem and he cleanses the temple of all these merchants and these money changers and so forth. And Luke doesn't give us quite as much detail as some of the other Gospels do. But the fact is, he tells us his reason for doing that was to kind of reinstitute the very purpose of the temple, and that was prayer, so that people could approach the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the God of creation. If you go back into the Old Testament and read 1 Kings chapter 8, you would read Solomon's prayer of dedication was in fact a prayer asking God that when people came to this temple, he would listen to their pleas and their requests. Even aliens, if they were to come and pray to their God, that he would listen to them. So Jesus not only cleanses the temple, sort of sets the area right as to what they were supposed to be doing, but he spends the rest of his time teaching there. And this seems to upset the leadership because they come and they question Jesus. authority to do these things. And of course, as we read through that in the first part of chapter 20, it becomes very clear that Jesus takes the opportunity to simply expose their duplicity. They don't really care about Jesus' authority. They're just trying to stop him. They don't care about John's authority. And they just really can't even answer the question as Jesus poses it to them. Well, Jesus kind of returns the favor and he questions their authority, not so much with a question, but with a story. And he tells the story, the parable of the tenants. And of course, as the story begins to unfold, those who are listening, particularly the chief priests, the scribes, and the Pharisees, they clearly recognize that they are playing a role in this little story. They are the tenants who abuse everything and want to take the master's property for themselves. And the master will not tolerate that. But Jesus uses this occasion not only to criticize them, and they know it, but he also takes the occasion to bring out another messianic prediction. That is, that Jesus is the stone that the builders rejected. It's an ironic kind of thing, certainly. You would think they, of all people, would have recognized Jesus for what he was, but they didn't. And maybe a lot of people still don't today, but I hope you do. And I hope these stories, both about the birth of Jesus, as well as this triumphal entry and the climax that's now coming very much to a conclusion, is something that you'll think about during this Christmas time, during the time that we do celebrate the birth of one Jesus of Nazareth. So have some conversation about it. Start talking about it now during these few weeks leading up to Christmas, and get your family and your friends involved, and just have a little conversation about what Luke is telling us about this person, Jesus of Nazareth. Think about it and talk about it. And I hope you can come to grips with realizing he really did have the authority that was divine. Enjoy the conversation. Thank you.